this isn't the reminding that I said these talks are. It's not limited to these talks. You will also know it from when you've fallen in love with things. Because the nature of falling in love is for you to disappear momentarily, or for the person to disappear, and then everything just disappears into what is. So when you're kissing your lover, or listening to music, or whatever it seems like the individual loves, often in that the person, the separate energy, is disappearing. Then the mind comes in and says, I love that object, I must contain that object. And then often there's lots of struggle around it. This is often what's happening in relationships. And it's so funny because the way out of it is never in containing the objects. It's never in maintaining anything. It's never from running from the feelings of discomfort as you lose the object. It's in the stillness of what's appearing. I'm jumping from language to language, but maybe you get a sense of this underneath the language. I'm jumping from impersonal to personal language. This isn't about avoidance. This isn't about avoiding the character or the person or the body-mind mechanism, because the body-mind mechanism is about everything. And you will never get out of the illusion by denying the person. The only way out of this illusion is to fall in love with the illusion. Isn't that funny? Because when you fall in love, you and the world disappear. That's the nature of love. It's just intimacy. So whatever you think about this present situation isn't true. The person wants to hang on to something it thinks. This is wrong, this is right, this is the best, this is the worst. It's movement. And there's lots of other things moving as well in this. And there's nothing that's more you, and yet it's all you. So there might be these thoughts appearing, which you think are you and happening in you. There might be these feelings appearing, which you think are you and happening in you, but they're actually happening everywhere, in everything. They're not happening inside of you. There's not an inside and an outside. There's sounds appearing as well, but the personal energy says they are outside of me. They're separate from me. That's not true. They appear in the same way as the thoughts and the feelings. When you stop thinking about yourself and the world, this becomes really apparent. Sounds are happening in the same way that thoughts and feelings are happening. The ticking of the clock is as close to me as the thoughts and as the feelings. They're all happening in this. This is where it begins to become so apparent that this is a world of love. The same with the breeze on the skin, or the coolness on the skin, or the heat on the skin. I think there's movement of air happening. The mind says, the movement of air is outside of me, and the skin is me. That's a very logical thought, but in the instant of experiencing, that's not true. There is no inside and outside. The inside and outside were taught. There is no air which you are feeling. There is just feeling happening in this. So what we've been taught is we are drinking, and drink is going into us, and the drink is separate. But right here, that's again a lie. Right here, there is tasting happening, and there's not a divide between that which is tasted and the tasting, or the taster. They're the same movement. And then we open the eyes, and the mind says, I see people out there. Not true. Right here. That's not true. That's something you've been taught, and it's become an energetical belief that there is space between you and me. Right here, there's no space between us. There is no distance. Where does you begin and other? Only in time, in imagining. And that imagining was very practical, and is very practical, but it's not truth. It's not reality. We've taken it as a reality. They are out there, I am in here. That is not a reality in the instant of this experiencing. Right here, everything is you and in you. Then the question is, who are you? Who's the experiencer? We imagine the experiencer is somebody that's arrived here in time. We imagine the experiencer, like you, is somebody that arrived here in time. I am somebody that's had 30 years of life. We imagine the experiencer to be a product of time. That's what we imagine. We imagine the experiencer to be here as well. We are experiencing here.
Sometimes people say that saying there is nobody, and I'm so flexible in my language when I say there is nobody or everything's you, but often I will say there is nobody. And sometimes people say this is cold or uncompassionate thing to say when somebody's suffering, to say, but there is nobody. And I see it as the opposite, as love, because if there is nobody that this is happening for, so if there isn't separate people that this is happening for, then if there is somebody in this room suffering, then it's your suffering, in a way. So even when I say suffering goes, like personal suffering goes, and the person goes, when that goes, if there's somebody in here in pain, it's your pain, because it's appearing in this. And this is where the love side comes of there is nobody. It's not a cold, detached, there is nobody when somebody's suffering. It's the you, the inside you. I am inside this body, looking at the world through my projections of the world and my ideas of the world. When that collapses and somebody's screaming and shouting at you, or screaming hate, or doing something violent, that also is you. And to see it as you is absolute love. but it's not an intellectual thing. It's the end of that barrier. So therefore, there is nobody external that is the devil or the bad person. There is just life and forms happening. And if there is a form that is of violence, then that also is you. So there's nobody in here judging, or in the body judging the external as something separate that's got life wrong. And that to me is absolute love. That doesn't mean that this body doesn't run away, or this body doesn't say stop, or this body doesn't respond to the situation. The body will do what the body does. But it means that there's not somebody judging that as something bad happening out there. There's not somebody in there resting in an idea of that's bad, that's happening out there separate from me. They shouldn't do that, and it's nothing to do with me. It's absolute involvement in the situation. You are the situation. So if your lover is screaming and shouting, it's your screaming and shouting. If your friends are arguing and you're sitting, and then it's you arguing. There's not somebody there anymore judging that situation as something inappropriate. It's all you. Then that also means, though, when the saint is doing a beautiful act in front of you, that's also you. Or when there's a famous person collecting the Nobel Peace Prize or something, that's also you. You get the joy of both sides. So often when it's said there is nobody, people imagine that's a cold response, but it's actually a really involved in response. You think, the imagination thinks that I'm saying to the other person there is nobody, as if like denying the pain or the suffering or the discomfort that's arising. But it's not that. This is intimacy with all things that appear. This is the end of denial of anything. Not just the denial of who you are, but also the denial of who the other is. There's a separation.
You could say there's nobody else.
Yeah. Or, but then there's still not you. I know I keep slipping between the words. Like there's just, but yeah, you could say there's nobody else. Or whichever words, you can't quite get it.
But the emotions arise. If I see violence, if I hear of wars, if I hear of people getting beheaded, it's not only a thinking thing, but it calls up very strong emotions, and I don't know how to detach myself or myself. Okay.
When the personal entity is there, so emotions can arise, but when the person is there, so when the separation is there, everything that's experienced in the flow of life, like a beheading or violence, the person relates it back to its incompleteness, and that beheading will trigger the deepest sense of I'm not loved and I'm vulnerable. I've been rejected from oneness. So when you see a beheading, you're not actually seeing a beheading. What the personal energy is seeing is themselves being ultimately rejected by life. Because to be beheaded by another human seems like the ultimate rejection of love. I mean, that's like, could it get worse?
Yeah, indeed.
That's like a sickening for the separate self. When that drops, there will still be emotions to that, but the emotions will not belong to anyone and will be contained in freedom. Even the personal sense of self, that sense of feeling absolutely rejected, is contained in freedom.